The first thing I'll start with will be to draw a straight line at the top of my paper. This will serve as my starting point and also where my shoulder line would start from. This doesn't have a particular measurement. You can measure it if you want, maybe an inch from the top of the paper down, but there's no particular measurement. So I'll mark this line as my shoulder measurement. I'll come back later and make it a bit more clear. The next thing I'll be doing is to mark my length, my gown length, which is going to be my hemline. And my gown length is 36 inches, but I'll be adding half an inch for sewing my band later. I'll also transfer this 36.5 inches. I'll mark it on the other side so I can draw a perfectly straight line across my hemline. Next, I'll be marking my back length point, but before I do that, I will take off 1 inch from the shoulder line and I will mark it down, and then from that 1 inch I will mark my back length, which is 15 inches. So my back length is going to be 15 inches. I will mark that. And to draw a straight line again, I will transfer that measurement, that's the 15 inches plus the 1 inch that I've taken, and to be 16 inches. So I'll mark 16 inches and then use my pattern master ruler and draw a straight line. Now I have my back length, which is also going to stand as my waistline. And I write clearly my shoulder line again. And my hemline. The next thing I'm going to be marking is my shoulder. So my shoulder point is going to be 7 inches, that's 14 divided by 2, and then from that 7 inches I'll drop it down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and from that point I'll mark my armhole, which is going to be 7.5. That's for me. For a much bigger size you can have 8 and sometimes up to 9 inches. I'll now transfer that same measurement again forward a little bit just to have a straight line, which is going to be 7.5 plus 1 inch, that's 8.5, and then I will draw a straight line which will serve as my armhole. Now to get a straight line to complete my armhole, I'm going to mark that same 7 inch for my shoulder point and then draw a straight line connecting the shoulder slope to the armhole line. Then from the shoulder slope I will draw a straight line to the starting point of my pattern. Having divided my bust by 4, I'm going to be using that number and I'll place it on my armhole. And because I don't want the bust area to be fitted or snug, I'm going to be adding half an inch to my original bust measurement and then 1 inch for sewing allowance. The next thing I'll be doing is to get my neckline measurement. So for my neckline, I want it to be a bit wide, so I'm using 4 inches for it. Then for the back neckline, I am going to be just joining that 1 inch that we left earlier to that 4 inch mark with my curve. So I'm going to just use a curve to join the 2 points. This will be my back neckline. And for my front neckline, I'm going to be marking from the top down to 8 inches, and I'm going to make a slight V neck. So I'm going to be marking from that neckline point down to the 8-inch mark, and this is now my front neckline. I'm going to be marking it with a pink marker, just so that you can see the difference between the back neckline and the front neckline, since of course we're doing the measurements together, the back and the front together. Next is to make adjustments on the armhole line for our front. I'm going to be dividing the armhole depth by 2, and then on that half measurement I'm going to take it in by half an inch. Then using my curve, I'm going to connect the shoulder slope point to the half inch that I took in, and then I'll just make another curve that will go from that half inch mark to my bust line mark. So I have a curve that I can use for the armhole. It cannot be straight, so this is our front armhole. And I'll just go over that last curve with a black marker, just so that I will know that will serve as my back armhole. So my back armhole will join with the black, and my front armhole will just be the pink. Now for my hemline, to complete my side seam, I'm going to be marking my hip measurement plus an inch for movements. You can add up to 2 inches if you want or more, and then 1 inch sewing allowance. And from that point, I'm going to be connecting the bust point to the hemline, and I'll have my side seam. I'm going to be making a notch or just a snip with my scissors on the side seam along the waistline, because I want to use that to determine where my pockets are going to be. Now I'll just mark my center front CF and my center back CB, so that I know which one is my front when I'm cutting and which one is my back. I'm going to also be marking half-inch allowances on my armhole and my shoulder, and also my neckline. I will also mark half-inch allowances on my front neckline as well as my front armhole. This will ensure that I don't have any shortages with my measurements. Now I will cut my pattern, and from here I will go to cut my fabric. To draft my sleeve, I'm going to start with drawing a baseline, a straight line of course, so that I can have my starting point for my sleeve. From that point, I'll be marking my sleeve length first, which is 10 inches, and I'll mark 10 inches and half inch for sewing allowance. I'll again transfer the measurements to get a perfectly straight line. Next, I'll be marking my sleeve head, which I actually marked 6 inches here, but I would recommend that you mark 5 inches because 6 inches was a bit too much for me. So you should mark 5 inches across and then draw your straight line again. So this space will be our sleeve head. and this will be our sleeve hem line and our sleeve length, of course. Now on our sleeve hem line, I'll be marking my upper arm measurement, which is 14, and I will divide that by 2, giving me 7, and of course my 1 inch sewing allowance, same that I marked on my shift dress. Now I'll be creating my sleeve head curve, which will be starting from the top of the sleeve to the upper arm point. I'm using a pencil to draw it at first because it's freehand, and then I'll follow it with the marker. Next, I'll be marking my round arm sleeve, which I'm basically just going to be taking 1 inch of my upper arm measurement. You can take off 1 inch or half an inch, but nothing more than 1 inch because you don't want it to be fitted. So at most 1 inch, minimum of half an inch, and then I'll add my 1 inch sewing allowance and connect the upper arm point to the round arm point. And now I can cut out my pattern and use it to cut out my fabric. Don't forget to cut your fabric on fold. So I've cut out my sleeve from my fabric, on fold of course, and I have 2 pieces. I cut out 2 pieces because we have 2 sleeves. So 2 pieces. I'm making a slight notch at the edge of the sleeve so that I know where to connect it to my shoulder seam. And this is what my complete sleeve looks like. Now I sew.